Hi, my name is Erin, and I'm 30 years old. I've decided to share my story, not because I want sympathy, but because writing it all down might help me process the mess that turned my life upside down. It all started with the trust fund my parents had built for me, though I never really cared about the money. I always knew how much work my parents had put into building their business. They worked tirelessly to ensure a secure future for me, and I respected that. Despite being labeled a trust fund baby by almost everyone who knew me, I never fit the stereotype. Sure, people assumed I threw extravagant parties and showered my friends with money, but that wasn't me. I was grounded, modest even, and that often left people disappointed. When they realized I wouldn't live up to their expectations, they'd move on. Growing up, I saw firsthand how hard my father worked to create his business. He taught me that wealth wasn't just handed down, it required effort, discipline, and integrity. I carried that lesson with me as I got older. Even though I technically had access to a fortune, I wanted to build my own path. I worked tirelessly alongside my father, learning the ropes and contributing to the family business. When I got to college, I made a conscious decision not to date casually. I wanted to find someone who valued me for who I was, not for my family's wealth. It wasn't easy. Word spread quickly about my parents' trust fund, and suddenly, I was surrounded by people who seemed to see me as a walking bank. Some of them were subtle, others not so much. A few even tried to manipulate their way into my life, but I kept my guard up. That's why meeting Ashley felt like a breath of fresh air. We met during my college graduation celebration, and she seemed different from everyone else. She wasn't flashy or overly eager to impress me. We started talking casually, and before I knew it, I was captivated by her charm and intelligence. She didn't seem to know who I was, and I liked that. Our first date wasn't anything special. We went to McDonald's. I half expected her to complain, but she didn't. Instead, she laughed, ordered a Big Mac, and talked about her love for IT and problem solving. It was refreshing to be with someone who wasn't trying to use me or impress me. For the first time in years, I felt normal. Over the next few months, our relationship blossomed. Ashley met my parents, and they adored her. She was poised, intelligent, and incredibly charming. My parents had always wanted me to find someone who shared our family values, and Ashley seemed to fit the bill perfectly. She even told them she wanted to continue working after we got married, which impressed them even more. After a year of dating, I proposed. Ashley was ecstatic, and my parents couldn't have been happier. They even decided to add her as a beneficiary to my trust fund. Rob, the trustee who managed the fund's legalities and investments, handled all the paperwork. Everything seemed perfect. For the next 7 years, Ashley and I lived what I thought was a happy life. She worked for an IT company, traveled often for her job, and maintained a good relationship with my parents. I was busy managing the family business, and while we didn't spend as much time together as I would have liked, I trusted her completely. Things started to change after my parents passed away. Losing them both within 6 months was devastating, and I threw myself into work to cope with the grief. Ashley, however, became distant. I chalked it up to her grieving process, but deep down, something felt off. She didn't ask how I was doing or offer any comfort. She was always too busy or too tired to talk, and I started to feel more alone than ever. One evening, I decided to surprise her. I left work early, bought her favorite pink roses, and headed home. When I opened the door, I was met with a sight that made my stomach drop. Ashley was packing suitcases. And she wasn't alone. Rob was there, holding 2 suitcases of his own. At first, I was confused. I thought Rob was there to discuss something related to the trust fund. But then Ashley stepped forward and said, "I meant to do this quietly. I was going to leave you a note, but I guess we'll have to do it in person now. I'm leaving you, Aaron." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. She continued, "Rob and I are together now. We're going to Italy for a vacation, and when we get back, I'll be moving in with him. Your parents ensured I'd have enough money to live comfortably, so I'm not worried. Oh, and thanks for the flowers. They're lovely." Before I could respond, they walked out the door. The sound of their car engine roaring to life was the last thing I heard before everything went silent. For the next 2 days, I didn't leave the house. I shut the blinds, ignored phone calls, and lived off instant noodles. The silence was deafening, so I kept the TV on as background noise. I couldn't believe my wife of 8 years had betrayed me so thoroughly. On the third day, there was a knock at the door. I ignored it at first, thinking whoever it was would leave. But the knocking turned into pounding, and then a voice called out, "I know you're in there. Open the door." Reluctantly, I got up and opened the door to find a red-haired woman in a sharp suit standing there. She looked furious. "Your wife ran off with my husband," she said bluntly. "I'm Sandra, Rob's wife. We need to talk." Sandra wasted no time getting to the point. She had discovered the affair 2 days earlier when Rob left their home and promised to send his assistant to pick up the rest of his belongings. Heartbroken but determined, she started digging through Rob's things and found evidence of their affair and something even more alarming. Rob and Ashley had been embezzling money from the trust fund. It started small, but as they grew bolder, the amounts increased. Sandra had all the evidence: bank statements, emails, and messages between Rob and Ashley. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm going to destroy them, Aaron. I have a daughter to think about, and I won't let Rob get away with this. If you want to help, great. If not, stay out of my way." I hesitated for a moment, but ultimately agreed to help her. Sandra was fierce, determined, and incredibly organized. Together, we put a plan in motion to expose Rob and Ashley's betrayal. While they were vacationing in Italy, we filed lawsuits, froze accounts, and alerted the board of the company Rob worked for about his misconduct. By the time they returned, Rob had been fired, and Ashley discovered that her name had been removed from the trust fund. Ashley called me in a rage. "What's going on, Aaron? Rob says we're in trouble, and I don't see any money in my account." "Explain this," I calmly replied. "The money you and Rob stole is being reclaimed. You won't see a dime. I hope my lawyer has already been in touch." Before she could respond, I hung up. Later that day, Ashley showed up outside my workplace, waiting for me to leave. She looked desperate and confused. "Aaron, please, just talk to me," she pleaded. "I don't understand what's happening." I told her everything. "You wanted a divorce, Ashley. Well, you got it. But don't expect to benefit from my parents' hard work. That's over." Her face fell as she realized the full extent of what had happened. She tried to argue, to manipulate me, but I didn't let her. I walked away, leaving her standing there in shock. Rob didn't fare any better. With his reputation in ruins, no company wanted to hire him. Sandra took him to court, securing a settlement that ensured her and their daughter's financial security. As for me, it took time to rebuild my life, but I did. I focused on the business, surrounded myself with genuine people, and learned to value those who truly cared about me. The experience was painful, but it taught me an important lesson. Trust isn't something you give lightly. Now, I'm in a better place. I've moved on from Ashley and the betrayal, and I'm stronger for it. Sometimes, life has a way of showing you who really deserves to be in your Sandra, who had been a steady pillar of support throughout my turbulent journey, proved to be an extraordinary ally when it came to the legal battle ahead. I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders as I drove home that day. It had been a week since everything had come to light, since Ashley had betrayed me in ways that I never thought possible. The sense of relief I felt, even though fleeting, came from the fact that I wasn't in this alone anymore. Sandra, along with a few of her lawyer friends, had taken charge and provided me with the best counsel available. I was certain now that I would win the lawsuit. Custody of our child seemed like a possibility, and I had a strong support network to back me. When I arrived home, I sat down to write. I had so many emotions swirling around inside me: anger, hurt, confusion, and I needed to let them out. As I recounted the events, I found myself asking if I had been too harsh on Ashley, or was it just that her actions warranted the anger I felt? I questioned myself as I poured the frustration of the last few days into writing. Was it possible for someone to betray their partner in such a profound way and then expect everything to go back to normal? A week had passed, and I felt it was time to update everyone on the situation. I appreciated all the messages I had received in response to my initial post. They had been a lifeline when I felt lost and unsure of what to do. During my first therapy session, I showed the therapist this Reddit article. He said it was a good way to cope and that it was entirely normal to grieve the person I had lost, in this case, Ashley. I didn't fully realize it then, but as he explained it, it made sense that I was so overwhelmed after the truth came to light. I started to explain to my therapist how the past week had unfolded. After receiving a call from Ashley that was surprisingly softer in tone, I was initially caught off guard. She had been crying, and her voice sounded muffled, as if she was on the verge of falling apart. Her first question to me was if I had eaten dinner. She then proceeded to ask if I wanted her to come over and cook for me. I had expected her to act indifferently, so I was taken aback by her sudden shift in behavior. But something inside me snapped, and I quickly declined her offer. What followed next was something I will never forget. Ashley insisted on coming over regardless of my wishes, claiming she would be at my house in 30 minutes. I couldn't believe it. She must have interpreted my silence as a yes, and I found myself shaking my head in disbelief. I had been so certain of her deception, and now she wanted to come over and pretend like nothing had happened. My emotions surged, and I finally managed to find my voice. No, you won't," I said, almost yelling into the phone. "Are you serious? You want to come here and cook dinner after everything you've done? After everything you put me through?" My voice trembled with rage. I couldn't believe the audacity. What you did was bad, simply awful. It was evil. Self-centered and cruel. You're going to hell for this. I never want to see your face again. What the hell is wrong with you? Ashley tried to brush it off, telling me to stop overreacting. But in that moment, I knew I was seeing her true face, the woman who had no remorse, no guilt for what she had done. I realized she didn't regret a thing. She would do it all over again if she could. As she continued talking about how I was portraying her as a gold digger in the lawsuit, I couldn't hold back any longer. "I paid off your student loans," I shouted. "If you're living comfortably now, it's because of me and my family. You think you can come here and act like the victim?" She continued to blame me for not being there for her, accusing me of being absent on business trips while she found solace in Rob's arms. She even claimed that she had a passionate romance with him, something I never provided. At this point, I knew I was done. I asked her, "What about Rob?" Her response was almost casual. She claimed Rob was different, and that's why she had an affair with him. She went on to accuse me of never being there for her and of lacking passion in our marriage. When I tried to reason with her, telling her that the answer was never cheating, that we could have gone to therapy or talked things through, she dismissed me. She insisted on coming over and making things right. At that moment, I realized it was all just a manipulation, a trap to get me to drop the lawsuit and let her off the hook. She didn't want reconciliation, she wanted control. In a fit of frustration, I hung up the phone and called Sandra. She listened patiently, and after I explained everything that had transpired, she gave me a simple piece of advice. She wanted me to call Ashley back and invite her over. Sandra, always the strategist, was certain that this would reveal Ashley's true intentions. I agreed, not fully understanding what Sandra had planned, but trusting her completely. When I dialed Ashley's number, she answered with a smug tone. She had no idea what was about to happen. She confidently stated that she would be at my house in 30 minutes, as if she knew I would eventually come around. Sandra, however, had arrived before Ashley. The plan was in motion, and I had no idea what Sandra had prepared. She told me to make sure Ashley sat in the dining room when she arrived. Sandra had a special role to play, and it was clear she was enjoying every moment of it. As expected, Ashley arrived at my house, looking more presentable than usual. She walked in confidently, gave me a quick kiss, and began heading for the bedroom. I stopped her in her tracks and told her to sit in the dining room. "But why?" she pouted, looking at me with confusion and perhaps a hint of annoyance. Sandra emerged from the bedroom, and the look on Ashley's face was priceless. She stood frozen, unable to speak at first. Sandra, with a wicked grin, looked at Ashley and said, "Ah, finally we meet the woman who is dating my useless husband, Rob the cheater." The words hung in the air like poison. Ashley was taken aback, her face turning pale. She stammered, trying to defend herself, but Sandra wasn't having it. "You forfeited your right to this home a long time ago," Sandra continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "How could you betray your family like this? How could you do this to him?" Ashley started to protest, claiming that everything had fallen apart because of me. "You have no idea what I've been through," she said, still trying to shift the blame onto me. She accused me of not being present, of not understanding her. But Sandra wasn't buying it. "Is that why you turned to Rob?" Sandra shot back, her tone cutting through the air. "Is that why you think it's okay to sleep with my ex-husband and destroy everything?" At this point, I knew it was over. Ashley was no longer the woman I had once loved. She was someone I couldn't recognize, and I had nothing left for her. The charade was over. As Sandra and I exchanged looks, she delivered the final blow. "You're going to leave, Ashley," Sandra said, her voice low and firm. "You've lost everything. This marriage is over. Your affair with Rob is done. Go." Ashley hurled insults at us as she stormed out of the house, but I didn't care. The damage had been done, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer. Afterward, I called Sandra to check in. She was elated. "Erin, I've got it," she said, her voice full of excitement. "I got a confession out of her. She's done. It's over." Sandra had recorded everything, and the evidence was damning. She had already submitted the recording to Ashley's employer, warning them about her untrustworthiness. In the note, Sandra had explained that someone who would go to such lengths to deceive her loved ones couldn't be trusted in the workplace either. To make matters worse for Ashley, Sandra's longtime friend, who worked with Ashley's business partner, had withdrawn from a major deal that was about to go through. The withdrawal was linked to the concerns about Ashley's integrity, and the deal was abruptly canceled. This move hit Ashley hard. But the good news didn't stop there. Within days, Ashley was fired from her job. Rob, too, had been unable to find stable work, and the financial strain was becoming unbearable. As if things couldn't get worse, I found out that Rob had been arrested for assaulting someone outside the courthouse. I was still reeling from everything that had happened, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was a glimmer of justice on the horizon. I could finally see the end of this toxic chapter of my life. Sandra, ever the mastermind, had ensured that both Ashley and Rob were feeling the full force of their actions. But the story didn't end there. Sandra received disturbing news. Rob had shown up at her door one night, drunk, and tried to break in. Sandra had the whole thing on her security cameras, and it was clear that Rob was unhinged. He had been harassing her, and when she refused to let him in, he became violent. Sandra had to file a restraining order, and the situation with Emily, their daughter, became even more complicated. Emily had been traumatized by the whole ordeal. She had witnessed her father's behavior, and it broke my heart. Sandra asked me to stay with her that night to provide comfort and support for Emily, and I agreed without hesitation. The poor girl was scared, and I wasn't going to leave her alone. I spent the night comforting Emily, who was clinging to me, asking me to promise that her father wouldn't come back. It was clear she was terrified, and I knew that she needed stability. The next day, when Sandra returned, Emily was still holding on to me, unwilling to let go. It was a stark reminder of the damage Rob had done not just to Sandra, but to their daughter as well. The situation was spiraling, but I remained determined to help Sandra through it. We both knew that this battle wasn't over yet, but with the evidence stacked against them, it was only a matter of time before Ashley and Rob would face the consequences of their actions. As the initial court hearings began, it became evident that the evidence was overwhelmingly in Sandra's favor. Both Ashley and Rob had no way out, but it would take time, and there was still the matter of Rob's involvement with their daughter. It seemed like every day there was a new update, a new turn of events. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in months, I felt hopeful. Corner.